and being able to pivot rapidly since something does need to be done to stop the threat. Chuck, I'll let you jump in there.
No, happy to. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I've been hitting the mute button so you don't get an echo, but absolutely, I think we're at a very interesting time. I think you're seeing the culmination of years of efforts, by the NSTAC, Cybersecurity Moonshot, by the National Infrastructure Advisory Council, multiple reports by the Defense Science Board, and I've never seen as much movement as we're seeing right now in DC to actually try to establish a true collaborative relationship between the private sector and the government to actually work shoulder to shoulder to address and mitigate these threats. I think you have kind of from a purely mission perspective, the dream team in Washington, D.C., not saying anything, this is not political whatsoever. This is just based on experience in the intelligence community. When you have Ann Neuberger, Chris Inglis, Jenny Easterly, and Rob Joyce all engaged, and all the other people that are heavily engaged in this that have been working this issue for so long. This is the time that we're potentially going to see some success that we haven't seen in a long time. And I think there's more dialogue too about we've got to go beyond just the information sharing. I know in my previous job there's frustration because it's one thing to get called into a meeting and be given a one-time read on and be given a briefing with some highly classified information. And then you go back to your office and your whole staff has no clearances and you're the director of a company or a CEO, and how do you task your people? What do they do to mitigate the threat? And there's actually dialogue going on now. How do we work together and get the right people in the room to technically address these problems and come up with solutions? So we're not just sharing information, but we're actually developing mitigations and ways to counter the threat together and leveraging all the authorities that we can do. So I'm pretty excited about that. And you've seen some of that announced recently by Jen Easterly, such as the Joint Collaborative the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative. DOE just announced just a couple weeks ago the new Clean Energy Cybersecurity Accelerator with the National Renewable Energy Lab out in Colorado, out in Denver. You've also got the joint collaborative environment that was proposed by the Solarium Commission that everyone's talking about. And NSA has stood up their cybersecurity collaborative center, which is working with the Defense Industrial Base. So there's more movement than we've seen in quite some time in this area from the federal government. And I'm hopeful that we'll continue to progress. And the one thing I'm hoping that they'll do is also engage with the national laboratories more, because the laboratories have been working on this for quite some time as well and can provide a lot of technical expertise and tools that can help to mitigate these things. A lot of experience in artificial intelligence, machine learning, exascale computing, HPC computing, all the tools that we're going to need to address a threat as large as what we're seeing from these nation-state adversaries that are threatening our critical infrastructure.
Great.
Chuck brings up a very good point, but I also believe that with machine learning and the artificial intelligence, we're still not at a point where we're capturing everything, obviously. And the crowdsourcing ability to go beyond just the machine-to-machine integration. We were one of the first in the country with DHS under the CISP program to exchange machine-to-machine information for response. Now, obviously, machine learning, artificial intelligence were not at the point then that they are now. However, the exchange of that information provides a haystack. There's so much information available today that we have a lot of white noise. What we're looking for is that needle in the haystack, and that depends both on taking as much burden as possible through automation off of our shoulders, but at the same time, leveraging the knowledge of the individual organizations, the baseline, for anomalies that generally we have found direct us to the 0-day and or near 0-day really being able to take more proactive action. So the blueprint the Solarium report has provided to the government, and with the significant input from private sector, I think is taking us in the right direction, so long as we do not forget to look at what has worked in the past and be able to leverage that, particularly as it relates to that trust foundation, because without that, we do not have information exchange.
So this week, Director Easterly said after her very long career through NSA and other parts of the government where she was just a total rock star in the government side, she said the most formative bit of her expertise, of her background that prepared her for the new job as director of CISA was her 4 years at Morgan Stanley in the private sector. She said looking at it from the other side, looking at how suddenly Washington doesn't look so well put together and it looks like it's difficult, and she shared the same thing, Chuck, you mentioned of being able to not share actionable intelligence that she learned in the classified setting with people that don't have those clearances. So that is certainly guiding her, and you know she obviously works so well with Chris Inglis and Rob Joyce with the same sets of backgrounds in trying to make this better. So you both mentioned the word that I hear a lot now from the leadership, which is actionable. Talk to me a little bit about how we move public-private partnerships forward. What does actionable mean in your context? What can we do more than just giving day-old Time magazine clips?
Yeah, I mean, I can give a quick answer here that, for me, actionable means, even though I'm an Intel guy, we've got to move away from this model of being focused on the classified information. I think Frank already alluded to the work that they're doing in crowdsourcing, and it shows the value of operating in the unclassified space. So I think to make things actionable, based on some of the interviews we did when I was supporting the NIAC, we talked to the British National Cyber Security Center, and they said when they came in, they thought that all the intelligence was going to be on the classified side. Once they developed their relationship with private sector companies in the United Kingdom, they found out 90% of the intelligence is actually in the unclassified data. So I think we've got to kind of shift our model and our thinking to this greater focus on developing the tools and the mechanisms to look at the unclassified data so we can share it more quickly, so it's more actionable for the private sector companies to address those issues. On the classified side, we can still feed information in for analysis, and we should, but the classified data is things that will go forward to inform the policymakers as they make decisions about nation states and counteractions. That information is going to take much longer to get to the private sector because it's going to have to go through the usual reviews. So to be actionable, it's got to be at the lowest classified level or unclassified, and we've got to get better at doing that and collaborating together in that space. We won't abandon the classified space, but we've got to give more focus to the unclassified.
Frank?
I think for that to be able to happen, again, we have to recognize who owns the information. And I agree 100% with Chuck on what he said, that the OSINT intelligence we have seen from day one through the current to be what actually gives us that needle in the haystack. So what we have found is in order for that to occur, we give the keys to the kingdom to those who own the information. And our organizations are about half local government entities, half private sector. And with them having that control, they then trust it because they control what they are able to share. We have full API integration between threat intelligence available to every member organization at their option, to be able to integrate without worrying about what the brand is, etc., with the defense systems that they have. And that gives them the ability to make that final call, whether they do it automatically or through review because of the false positives. Be able to bring into their defense exactly what they need to do. So from a very practical standpoint, we need to leverage that available open source intelligence. We also need to move the tear line because we continue to have the problem of too much information being overclassified many times. And once it's above the tear line, we can't act on it quickly, let alone in some cases act on it at all. And I think that the more we can bring into that open source environment, the more rapid the response. As Stanley McChrystal said, it takes a network to defeat a network. We cannot be hierarchical. We need to be flat, responsive, and able to act very quickly.
So one of the best examples of working collaboratively, as you said, Frank, has historically been the ISACs that go sector by sector. So financial services ISAC, or the energy ISAC, or the healthcare ISAC, they get together, and it's the leading companies in that space that organize, that create the agenda, that control the agenda, but are informed by relevant government partners in that area. And it's in areas where the sectors have really jumped in and really tried to make it successful, it's been very useful. Financial services being sort of the earliest one to do that, but a number of them are now playing catch up. Do you think that is a model to be further expanded upon, or do we need to, you said not reinvent the wheel, Frank, but should we create something again new, or should we build upon the ISAC sector by sector effort?
You're seeing within Congress right now several committees that are looking in response to ransomware, specifically rapid sharing of information. One of the U.S. Chamber Coalition's responses, representing 47 organizations and so forth, was that organizations, if they are sharing information, to be able to do so directly or do it through a designee or designees. We presently go across 15 of 16 critical sectors. The only one we are not represented in is agriculture. That horizontal visibility gives us a tremendous ability for member organizations to recognize what is directly affecting them right now, but more importantly, what is affecting others that may affect them in the future. Without the ISAL model, which 2015, the President Obama's executive order, we finally heard about ISALs, and I think without those models, the successful ones that have demonstrated capacity and capability, we are going to lose a lot of the contribution. Having people instead simply meet regulatory requirements for reporting, not have the passion to go beyond that, and in so doing, not protect as fully as we would in the event that we were able to leverage those models as an option while providing direct reporting capability. Likewise, since many of the regulated industries you mentioned, finance being a great example, are already subject to reporting, we need to not create a bureaucracy around it with duplication of effort, and need to recognize if reporting is there, not to have duplicative reporting that's going to take scarce resources away from protecting direct critical infrastructure.
Excellent points, Frank. And I would just make a note that we're here in the Georgia Cyber Center, which is shared with Augusta University, one of the leading new cyber universities in America. And I see a bunch of students here on the right-hand side of the audience. So just on notice that I'm going to call on and expect at least one student question for these guys before the end. So be thinking about something to ask these two. Chuck, you mentioned the new JCDC that was just announced. It started, is starting with the usual suspects, but listening to Director Easterly this week, she's very clear that she wants this to be different. She wants this to be broad and inclusive and really actionable. Can you talk a little bit about what your hopes are for JCDC and the impact it could have?
Yeah, well, I would love to see the JCDC, set the tempo and the lead for a greater development of an ecosystem, if you will, of, to protect critical infrastructure and cybersecurity. And what I mean by that is, I kind of look at the JCDC as potentially the start of like the National Joint Terrorism Task Force that was created after 9/11. And then after that, you know, we created over 200 regional joint terrorism task forces across the nation to address terrorism. And I think at the heart of the matter, we're looking at regional, and we're looking at multiple cyber centers that have to have some type of somebody at the apex that's doing that horizontal analysis and that collaboration. And I would love to see the JCDC grow into something like that, because I don't think we're going to be able to do it all in one place. When you look at just the energy sector, there's over 3,000 utility companies. We're never going to have enough regional centers to have all those in one SCIF or in one facility. So if the JCDC could be the start and then expand into regional centers also to bring in state and local and other collaboration, and then kind of lead the horizontal analysis, is what I used to call it, of the threat and the information sharing, I think that would be a great step forward, because we're not going to be able to do it all out of Washington, D.C. There's just no way that that's going to happen. And we can do a lot of things virtually now, but I still think it's going to require places for people to gather, develop relationships, and then you can do things virtually after that. But you have to have some interpersonal relationships to develop the trust that we're going to need to move this forward as well. Because if you, it sounds like you watched the presentation from the McCrary Institute on Tuesday. And I think I took Bill Furman's words to heart, having been in the private sector, that, you know, there's some pessimism on the private sector side that they're going to give their data away and not get anything in return. And I think that's one of the important things the JCDC can do, is to make sure that information is disseminated and shared so that the private sector does see information coming back in return. Because without that, without a building of trust, it's not going to succeed or go much further than we went with our previous efforts.
Great point. Trust is a critical word here, and I think everyone agrees that it needs to be earned throughout this process, continuously earned and kept for this in order to work. It can't be a one-way street of companies feeding the beast and then never hearing anything back. That's what we used to have. I think that's not what the plan is now. You know, one of the things that came out of the Solarium report, one of the things that came out of the NIAC report that you worked on previously, one of the things that came out of the Moonshot report was the need for companies themselves to better organize themselves around this common defense and become a better dance partner for the government. We want to make it easier for that public and private, or private-public. We want to make it easier for that to work. And I think that there's a real new chance, new fresh chance. In the Moonshot report, we looked at two examples from history from the 80s and 90s. Sematech was built around solving a common problem we had around chips and needing to be a world leader in microchips. And MCC, the Microelectronics and Computer Technology Consortium, was around sort of the beginnings of this information superhighway and how we can collaborate for things like electronic commerce. Both of those were not-for-profit, private organizations that gained favors from government. They got antitrust exemptions from Congress, and they got early funding, but they were private companies deciding to throw in together for their own good as well as the good of the nation. And there is a lot of talk now about, is it time for the private sector to do this again and really collaborate, so that when we talk about public-private, that the private has something that's really useful that can guide, especially in these new technologies, Frank, that you talked about with AI and 5G that are coming to your state and everywhere else. You know, how do we get in and make that actionable? So if you guys could comment on that as a concept, and are we ready for that again?
I think what you bring up is very germane, Tom, and that is that nobody acts against their self-interest. Using your dance example, I've never seen anybody at a dance approach a partner unless they believe it's in their or mutual self-interest. And very similarly here, we need to get the engagement of private sector. From my perspective, I would like to see it driven by private sector collaboratively with government. And I think that's very important. Our members, in their self-interest, the corporations are trying to protect the assets, which are the factors of production to generate revenue and the economy. Our government partners, they're trying to protect those who they protect in terms of the population and so forth, and provide that as the first line of defense. So initially, the real focus needs to be on stopping the flow of data out, or get the adversaries out of the infrastructure so that you can go back to normal operations. Once that is in place, then the focus needs to be on collaboration immediately and in parallel with government in order to eliminate the threat at the source. If all we do is play whack-a-mole every day, the only thing we're going to accomplish is essentially knocking ourselves out in terms of trying to stop the adversary. That's dealing with the symptom. We need to also deal with the cause, and it's the whole evasion approach, dealing with government in a positive, constructive, flexible manner that's going to allow us to do that.
Excellent. Chuck, do you have any thoughts on that as a concept now?
I do. I mean, I actually support that concept. I say that knowing that it won't work across all of industry. Some of the companies are just too small, or if you look at the, we've been talking a lot, or there's been a lot in the news lately about the municipalities and the water districts. You're talking about over 16,000 independent municipalities. And cities don't necessarily have a lot of money to devote to that cybersecurity piece. So I think it's got to be a mixture. But I do think when you look at a lot of the larger companies that have the resources, I think there is a opportunity there for those companies with common interest to come together and help develop information sharing and addressing some of the challenges up front, instead of waiting for the government to come in and try to address those challenges. Because one of the problems with waiting for the government to do some of that as well is the nature of the government is the people in the seats in DC change, and they change fairly frequently compared to the problem set that we're looking at. So what we're doing now is great. And like I said, just from a mission perspective, the people we have in Washington, DC are great. And they understand the mission space very well. And we have more of them collectively in one spot than we've had in a long time. But, we're going to have another election in 4 years. Sometimes it's not uncommon for people in political positions not to go the whole 4 years. And I'm not implying anything, but when you're working these problem sets as we have for so many years, then you lose momentum every time the seats change and the direction changes. So how do we keep up that momentum? And I think private industry, especially the larger companies, could pick up some of that role and help lead that so that there's more consistency and we keep going in a common direction. But that's just my thoughts.
Real good. All right, so we've got 5 minutes or so left, so let's go into lightning round mode. Question number one, what are some public-private groups that you like in the cyberspace that a company that's in one of the critical sectors could join now that they may not know about, beyond the ISACs? What's something that you find is good that you would say, hey, take a look at? Frank?
I think Actor's model, as having been reviewed independently by New America, Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics, and others, has proven to be a very successful grassroots-driven model, and it complements the ISACs. It complements the government entities. And I think as we are growing, we are also finding interest in other parts of the country. We are currently working with several other states to initiate grassroots efforts, not ones that we would control in any sense of the word, but assisting them in bringing up their own on a very efficient, cost-effective basis and time-to-market basis, and then allowing them to become self-sufficient and integrate that from day one with the agencies and others so that we're able to deal with both the symptoms as well as the ultimate disease directly. So I think that represents model. I also think you mentioned several ISACs that are out there, but beyond the ISACs, I think we need to look at that last mile to the curve, just as in telecommunications, getting the engagement, involvement of people requires trust at the local level, as Chuck said, and we need to build on that.
All right. Frank or Chuck, do you have one?
So I guess the one that comes to mind is during the last year and a half, 2 years, I had the opportunity to work with the Kansas Intelligence Fusion Center. And once I started working with them, I was very impressed because they are one of the fusion centers that was started by a couple of Intel folks with a focus on operating at the TSSCI level from the very beginning. So they have a very good model for working with private sector companies and getting the people that participate there top secret clearances. And they've got a good model on how to protect the corporate interests and sharing data and developing collaboration. And that model is actually, they're trying to expand that model. And I know they're looking at developing a similar model up in the Northeast United States based on that model. So that's one I would look at as a model as far as the State Fusion Center. And then I think just coming online here, I would be watching for the opportunities with the JCDC and with the NSA collaboration centers to see what opportunities they present. And then I know DOE is doing a very small pilot, and I would be watching to see if that pilot takes off and gets bigger, although that would be more focused on the energy sector.
Good, and I will throw in one that I've been working on for about 10 years with the FBI, which is now called FBI DSAC or DSAC. Very good high-level amount of information exchange, and they do the thing that I think is most important. This leads to a next lightning round question for you guys. A word of wisdom for people wanting to be part of this, wanting to contribute to the greater good. You have a word of wisdom. I'll start with mine, and that is born out of tough experience, that you need to make your connections before your disaster. So get to know your local FBI field agent or your Secret Service field agent or somebody in JCDC or somebody in DSAC. Become friends first. Move, as we say in our business, left of boom. It's much easier to go out and have a cup of coffee with a federal partner or a state partner before there's a disaster. Then when there's something, you're calling up and saying, hey, remember me, here's what we're going on. That is, for me, a critical success factor in recovery and response. Chuck, what's your word of wisdom for people?
I think I'll take and pile on a little bit to what you just said, that one of the things I was advocating for is to the left of boom, prepare for when boom happens. I think you see when these major events happen and they hit the news, especially with some of the larger companies, has there been enough discussion prior to an event happening? Who's going to be in the lead? Who all needs to be in the room to inform that spokesperson or that CEO before they go forward to speak, and how are they going to do it? Because at that point, everybody's perception of how you're handling what happened, whether you're in the government or you're a private sector company, is going to hinge on the way that you come across in the news and in the interviews that are going to follow. And some pre-preparation and some wargaming, I think, of what will happen if we have that bad day. Will help you react better when it actually happens. And that preparation you talked about feeds into that as well.
Sage advice. Frank?
What I'd leave you with is that it's all about people, meaning it's all about trust. Without the trust, it simply won't work. We need to understand our own self-interest, be able to align that self-interest, and from that, we need to open up the communications. As an example, building on what Tom said, I sit down about every 2 weeks with the HSAC over cyber and Phoenix FBI with the intent of opening up communication and acting as a force multiplier, contributing both ways to efforts. without that communication, without it going across not only public, private, but the agencies, simply will not work in the end result.
All right, people, absolutely. Okay, we're going to give the last question to the student section. Who do we got? Yeah, come on up. Hurry. The clock's ticking. Come on, get up on camera. You can come. Come on. I have a chemistry tinted question. Step right up. Give me a name, year, and ask away.
Okay, so my name is Caleb Worku. I'm a junior attending Augusta University actually here, and I'm majoring in cybersecurity. And thank you guys for taking the time to speak. And my question was, like I said, I'm a student here attending Augusta University. And from my experience here so far, I've noticed that the curriculum has been, or it seems not to have been up to speed to the evolving nature of the cybersecurity industry. And I know this is not really related to what you guys have said, but kind of what steps do you guys recommend like that universities like Augusta University can take to, I guess, improve that kind of relationship?
Good question. Thank you. What do they got? Chuck?
You know, I don't know how we're going to get there right now, but I think what you have to look at, maybe from a university perspective, is this is a career field where you have to live it.
Right.
You really can't learn it. You can learn some fundamentals, but then after that, you have to go out and you have to live it. And you've got to be online. You've got to be involved in these forums and these discussions. And I think maybe as we're looking at how we mature the cybersecurity workforce, you can almost look at maybe the Intel community model, that what we'll do is we'll pull people in from the field that have been recent practitioners and have them be on the platform for short periods of time or for a limited period of time and then return them back to the field. So maybe that's one thing I guess I would suggest is maybe the universities could look at more opportunities to pull people from the field. I know they're very busy. I know they're overworked right now. And have the practitioners come in and give presentations about what's happening real time, real space right now with what's happening. Because as you've noted, it's changing all the time. We had Colonial Pipeline, we had SolarWinds, the next one's right around the corner, and they're all gonna have something unique about them, and it's always changing.
Excellent.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank you.
Chuck. Thank you. I would say one word, internships. That's where it's at.
Right.
So that's where you're gonna learn, as Chuck said. Okay, real quick, Henry. Last question.
I'd just like to say one thing on that AI, on
We've
that
got the
last
book.
point.
Real quick.
Okay.
One person we observed
Hi,
the
I'm
number
Henry.
of
I'm a chemistry
times
chemistry
people
student here at
going to
Augusta
be
University.
comparing to AI and then
And
now look
Hang on, Frank.
at each other here.
Hang on, Frank. We got one more student.
as a chemistry student here at Augusta University, and I'm just starting to learn this whole world of cyber. And mentioning or hearing y'all talk about the clearances and the problems you're having with that, what's the proper way to remedy that, or what should we go down? Because, you know, I heard you say it was something like 90% of the data that wasn't compacted in the clearances what was needed, but what's that other 10% look like, and how can we keep it secure?
Well, first, stay out of jail. Quite honestly, you have a huge advantage over most of these people out here because you haven't lived your full life yet. They've done something wrong. They've traveled to the wrong country. They've shaken hands with the wrong person. You probably haven't done that. So you've got an advantage. Just stay clean, and then when you take a job that requires a clearance, they'll sponsor you for that clearance, and then you just have to keep staying clean. And if you start off young and without a bad record, you can have no problem getting a clearance.
Okay.
All right, thank you. And I think we're over time, but I want to thank Frank and thank Chuck very much. Great insight here. Public and private is the topic of the day, and I think it was great that the CFF devoted so much time and quality experts to that. So thank you guys very much.